Imperial Settlers is a card game that lets players lead factions so they expand their empires into newly discovered lands. At the end of the game, the player with the most victory points has the greatest empire and wins. To set up the game, each player needs to first choose a faction to take control of, taking its board and deck and adding that faction's victory point marker to the tracker on 0. Each faction has its own faction deck, its own starting production, and a resource which it can store from round to round. Each player then draws 2 cards from their faction deck and 2 cards from the common deck. In total, there are 7 different resources in the game: wood, stone, food, workers, raise tokens, and defense tokens. Finally, there are gold tokens, which act as a joker and can be used in place of wood, stone, or food. If the supplier runs out of a resource, players can use the multiplier tokens to indicate that they have 5 of that particular thing. Similarly, if a deck runs out, its discard pile should be shuffled to form a new deck. The game is played across 5 rounds, each of which is divided into 4 phases: lookout, production, action, and cleanup. Lookout phase is where players acquire new cards. First, each player draws a card from their faction deck. You then lay out the number of cards equal to the number of players plus 1 from the common deck. Starting with the first player and going clockwise, players then take turns to select a card. Final cards discarded. This process is then repeated, but starting with the last player and going around anti-clockwise. We then enter the production phase. Each player totals up everything on their faction board and any deals or production locations, and then take the goods, cards, or victory points they've earned. Next is the action phase. Starting with the first player and continuing clockwise, each player performs either an action or passes. The actions available are to build the location, raise, make a deal, activate an action card, or exchange 2 workers for 1 card or resource. To build the location from your hand, you pay the cost listed in the top left of the card. If you construct a production location, you gain what it supplies you immediately. Unless stated otherwise, you should always take goods from the general supply, and you may draw cards from either the common or your faction deck. If a location building has a location symbol in its cost, you must discard one of your previously built common locations to build it. Faction locations are built to the left of your player board, and common locations to the right. Production cards are built at the top, features in the middle, and actions at the bottom. To make a deal, you pay 1 food and place a faction card upside down under your faction board. You gain what the deal supplies you immediately. You can raise from your hand by paying a raise token and discarding a card, taking the goods listed in the top right of the card. You can also raise an opponent's built location by paying 2 raise tokens. In this case, you gain the goods listed in the top right, and the player who the location belongs to gets a wood. The location is flipped face down and can still be used to build a faction location for that player. Most faction locations cannot be raised, but some Japanese ones can. When they're raised, they are discarded. At any point during their turn, a player may assign their defense tokens to their locations. These increase the number of raise tokens to raise that location by 1. Once placed, they cannot be moved. This does not count as an action. The Japanese player can permanently deploy workers to his faction locations where they become samurai, behaving as defense tokens and remaining in place until the end of the game. To activate an action location, you place the resources required on top of the card. Most actions can only be performed once per round. If an action states it can be performed more than once, a player can activate it multiple times in a single activation. Once a player passes, they are out of that round and cannot then perform any additional actions. Once all players have passed, the round ends. We then enter the cleanup phase. This is skipped in the final round. Players discard all resources, workers, and tokens they cannot otherwise store. This includes defense tokens applied to locations. The first player token is then passed to the next clockwise player, and the round marker moves to the next place on the round track. A new round then begins. At the end of the 5th round, each player calculates their final score. Each common location they've built is worth 1 victory point, and each faction location is worth 2. Some features also reward the player with extra victory points. After all this, the player with the most victory points is the winner. That's everything you need to know to play Imperial Settlers. If you get stuck with a rule, there's a handy reference on the back of the manual. If in doubt, card rules always take precedence over the general rules. There you go then. Go play!